Let's go to the 18th century and let's understand that it's a different type of immigration that's coming into the United States. What would eventually become the United States and the 13 colonies, the British colonies. And that is known as, these immigrants are a little bit different. They're not primarily from Great Britain, but now they're German, Dutch, Scottish, and Irish. And these immigrants are going to be arriving in the 18th century. Spain, Britain, and France are going to be involved in a contest for control of the Caribbean, and they're going to be involved in a contest for control of the Mississippi River. Spain is in Florida. Great Britain has its 13 colonies from Georgia up to Massachusetts, and then there's the French that go down the Mississippi. So Spain, Britain, and France are going to be involved in a contest for control, not just of the Caribbean, which is providing valuable goods, raw materials, especially sugar and molasses, but also the Mississippi River. Immigration levels are going to increase vastly in the 18th century. The Europeans who immigrated to the British colonies were no longer primarily from the Anglo-Saxon areas. And these populations are going to be more diverse than the previous century. So whenever you go back to the 13 colonies, when you go back to the original 13 states, you will experience and appreciate this diversity. 40% of the immigrants that are going to be coming to Great Britain or the English colonies are Africans. They are destined for slavery. The voluntary immigrants included approximately 100,000 Irish. They were descendants of Scottish Presbyterians, and approximately 65,000 Germans, as well as Dutch and Scottish immigrants. So when you take a look at Pennsylvania, when you take a look at New Jersey, when you take and appreciate the histories of some of the southern colonies, the Carolinas, each of these groups are going to find homes in specific regions of the eastern seaboard, and they're initially going to try to create cultural links to the world that they left behind. They retain their native languages through the creation of linguistic schools, and they maintain their cultural customs through religion. So the immigrants who are going to create eventually the United States of America, they're going to benefit from the availability of land. And this is where the red beans comes in, the red beans, because one of the things that's going to happen when we talk about the red beans is that it's going to be their lands that the Europeans covet. And they're going to try to eliminate the red beans from their lands so as give opportunities to the white and blacks to come into work. And remember in that film clip, what it shared was that it was the white masters. There's always rich white males who are recruiting white workers to keep them in subservient positions. Please understand that. That's the nature of capital. Now, furthermore, the need for labor was prevalent throughout the era. Colonies actively recruited immigrants. The need for more workers was emphasized, especially when you take a look at the Declaration of Independence. Because in the Declaration of Independence, one of the things about the white owners is they didn't like the fact that Great Britain attempted to discourage immigration in the years leading up to the Revolution. So that is very important. You cannot stop the elite elements from recruiting workers. And Great Britain attempted to do that to prevent the elite elements from rebelling. Now, once the Revolutionary War was over, the number of immigrants are going to grow rapidly. So the Constitution didn't address the issue of immigration at the outset. Leaders of the Revolution, however, supported unlimited immigration of white Europeans, especially those who are wealthy or skilled. So, which gets us to the United States, and we'll understand certain things with regards to the colonial period, but let's get to the United States and immigration to once the United States was formed. Let's take a look at immigration to the United States between 1787 and 1840. When we take a look at the early 19th century immigration policy of the United States, it can be characterized as an open door for white Europeans with explicit instructions concerning the forced immigration of Africans to slavery. As we will witness in this class, there were few laws concerning immigration, and most that were enacted until the Civil War addressed really shipping and reporting requirements for the ships bringing immigrants to the United States. The American Revolution slowed immigration to the United States, and then the ultimate defeat of the British spurred an emigration or outmigration among British loyalists. But once the American Revolution ended, the Revolutionary War ended, immigration is going to resume, and the number of immigrants is rapidly going to grow. Now, although the Constitution itself does not address the issue of immigration, George Washington would not only welcomed not only the opulent and respected stranger in his work, but also the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and religions. Thomas Jefferson expressed some fears about the political assimilation of immigrants from nations ruled by absolute monarchs, but he also advocated government policies to attract immigrants who were wealthy or skilled. So when we take a look at most of the leaders of the new United States, they welcomed immigrants from Europe. Meanwhile, the Constitution was more explicit concerning the involuntary immigrant, concerning the forced migration of Africans. The framers of the Constitution prohibited Congress from restricting the importation of slaves prior to 1808. So the composition of post-revolutionary voluntary immigration was not significantly changed from the pre-revolutionary period. British and Scottish immigrants dominated the flow in these decades. But most of these immigrants settled in the cities of what would become the Northeast of the United States. Like their predecessors, these immigrants experienced considerable economic opportunity. Immigrants of this era had the option of migration westward as native peoples were constantly being removed towards the west. This geographic mobility reduced the potential for the formation of cohesive ethnic communities, and it also reduced the likelihood of anti-immigrant movements by the U.S. born in the cities and regions where the immigrants first settled. So during the first decade of this country's history, the elite consensus supporting unfettered European immigration is going to give way to a period of anti-immigrant fervor that reached its peak with the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798.